Hi, today is Sunday, December 6, 2015. My name's Alicia Barra, and I'm interviewing my mother, Patricia Duga Barra. All right, Mom, so tell us about when and where you were born.
I was born on May 14th, 1946 in Laurelville, Louisiana.
Okay, so what comes to mind when you think about growing up in Laurelville? The first thing that comes to mind.
Well, it was a very small village, and I had very close ties to my grandparents because they both lived in that small town, and I have really good memories too of growing up in a large family of 7 children.
And so describe the type of community that you grew up in.
Mostly agricultural. I would say back then everyone was tied to farming, and the oil industry was just beginning, but I just think that it was a very close-knit community, 100% Catholic, and our religion was the foundation of people in that small town.
And so what type of agriculture?
Sugarcane farming, rice farming.
And when and where was your mom born, and what was your mom's name?
Mom's name was Anna Mae Vaughn.
You show us a picture of her?
Yeah, right here.
All right, go ahead and talk about her.
Well, she was born on September 23rd, 1924, and she grew up actually in Mom and Pop Wick's home, which we moved next door to, but she's a beautiful woman, very spirited and very artistic. She kept journals her entire life, and I remember reading one of them that it was when she was in high school, and she was brilliant. She was salutatorian of her class. She actually wrote a column for the Daily Iberian, which was our only newspaper. It was published in New Iberia, Louisiana, which is a small town about 10 miles away.
And when you think of your mom, what do you remember most about her? What's the first thought?
I think the first thing I think about Mom is that she was very spirited, and I say that because she had 7 children, and she did the bookkeeping at Dad's service station, and she actually had 3 maids. She had a maid to cook, she had a maid to babysit the kids, and she had a maid to clean. And every single day at 10 o'clock in the morning, she would walk next door to her mom's house, my Mom Wick's house, and have coffee. Then she'd take a nap from 1 to 3, and then she'd go to have coffee at 3 o'clock at Mom Wick's, and then she would go back to the service station. So, I think I always thought when I was older that she had a very amazing life because, her mother lived next door and she could help a lot, and she was very involved in the community. She was, as I said, a very spirited person. She knew everyone. She was very outspoken. And she was involved in all sorts of things, home demonstration, Catholic Daughters, and
what did she do for a living?
she was a mother and I guess a businesswoman. She was very good in business and bookkeeping, and as I said, she kept all the books for Dad's service station. So she managed to do all that and take care of a family.
And what do you think was most important to her?
I would say her family, and I think secondly her community, because she had a lot of friends there. It was a very close-knit community, and those friendships lasted a lifetime. Unlike people, I think, who live in large cities now and don't have the support group and the kind of families that are very close to each other.
And when and how did she pass? What was her cause of death?
Mom, I think her health, I'm trying to remember, her health started failing about 3 years after Dad died, and I knew there would not be a long span, between the time Dad died and she did, because they were so very close, and she just wasted away, I think, emotionally after Dad died, because they were together 24 hours a day. And I remember going home quite often to see her, because I was retired at that time. I actually retired the year that Dad died. And I would see her falling into this state of mind where she did not want to speak anymore. And one day I got really angry with her. I said, "Mom, you chose to have us, and how could you not speak anymore?" But I think it was a form of depression that she was going through. But it's very difficult for me to see her.
And so what was the date that she died?
Well, February 17th, 2012.
And so tell us about who were her parents, and what do you remember about them, and if you have any pictures.
My grandfather's name was Willie Wycliffe Vaughn, and her dad, my maternal grandfather, and Mom Wick, that you have a picture of on my phone, and they lived next door to us, and we lived with them when I was born, I think maybe until I was about 3 years old. And Mom Wick was an amazing seamstress. She could look at a picture in a magazine and create that dress for me. And she made all my prom dresses and clothes from the time I was very young. She was an amazing cook, and she spoke very little English. So she did speak English, but her main language was French. But she couldn't really write or read. And I remember teaching her a little bit of reading as I was growing up. And my grandfather, we called him Pop Wick, and my grandmother we called Mom Wick, had a grocery store, a general merchandise grocery store across the street from their home. And he was an amazingly brilliant man in his own right, too. He actually taught me to read the newspaper when I was about 4 years old, and painstakingly teaching me one word at a time. And I thought about that when I was much older, and he was such a caring man, very gentle, and very important in his community, and people looked up to him as I did. I remember walking from his house to the grocery store. I think I might have been 3 years old. Mom had a picture of that, and I was holding his hand, and he had these seersucker pants on. It's amazing what you remember. And he would walk me from his home to the grocery store across the street.
So would you attribute your grandmother to teaching you how to cook or
Yes,
sew?
I actually watched her cook, and I think as I was getting older, I paid more attention to the way she cooked. And back then, people cooked everything from scratch. I mean, she would make a jambalaya from all fresh ingredients, and very seldom used canned goods. So I watched her do that, and I watched her sew, but I really didn't learn how to sew until I was in high school, and I took home ec 4 years in a row, and I'm proud to say that I won the Betty Crocker State Contest, which of course I actually didn't know how to cook or bake then, but it was a test, and I always did very well at tests.
Well, I know this is a stretch, but do you happen to remember, when and where they were born, or the approximate years?
Well, I don't. Well, actually, Mom and Pop Wick were born in 1918. Hang on a second. 1898. Yeah, 1898.
In Louisiana?
And yeah, in Louisville. They were both born in Louisville.
Okay. And when and how did each pass?
Pop Wick, I I want to say, let me think about this. Braden was born in 71, and I think he, let's see, 71, I think he passed in 1974. And he wasn't ill. I think he just died in his sleep. But I remember Mom Wick, I remember the day she died, and let me think about this. She died earlier. So, I mean, the years escape me, but I know she died earlier. And
Do you recall
she was ill. She was ill.
What she died of?
Yeah, she had arteriosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, and I do remember her being very ill and being in bed. And actually, we had a nurse that lived a couple of houses down, and she would come over and look after her. And then I remember Mom taking her to the hospital in New Iberia, and she called to tell us she died. And I happened to be sitting next to Pop Wick when that happened. And I think it was the hardest thing I had to ever do in my life was to tell him that Mom Wick had died. And he just, I just remember him crying. And that was, and the weird thing is that Larry's dad had a heart attack and died the same day. And Mom and Dad got married on August 19th, and Mom and Pop Wick had got married on August 19th. So she died on her wedding anniversary. Larry's dad died on the same day.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was...
And they had gotten married in the same day in the same year? Your grandparents and Dad's grandparents?
No.
Okay.
No. My grandparents got married on August 19th. I don't remember the year. But Mom and Dad got married on August the 19th. So you understand?
I see.
It was her wedding anniversary, Mom and Dad's wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And Larry's dad died on the same day.
Wow. So when and where was your dad born, and what was his name?
Homer John Dugai. He was born on February 4th.
You have a picture of him?
Mm-hmm. This is a picture of him. Here's a picture of him.
All right.
And then here's a picture of him in the military. He was in the Marines. He was actually wounded on Tarawa in World War II.
About how old do you think he is in that picture?
Oh, let me think about that.
Wasn't he underage?
Actually,
17?
17. Actually, he was too young to join the Army. He lied about his age to get in. But it was the war. And very patriotic man in Laurel, I have to say. A lot of his friends were deployed all over the world, and they all joined because they were very patriotic.
And so you said he was born in Lorville?
Mm-hmm. He was born in Lorville.
And what was that year again?
1924.
And the date?
February 4th.
February 4th?
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember most about Grandpa?
I tell you, he was brilliant in his own right. I think that there are so many different kinds of intelligence. Mom Wicks she could have been a fashion designer. I mean, she couldn't read or write, but as I said, she would look in a magazine and figure things out, how to sew. And, Dad was an amazing mechanic. And you wouldn't think that somebody who ran a small service station in a small town would understand that much about mechanics. But and I have to say this, that he didn't graduate from high school, and he went back and got his his graduation diploma when I was in high school. And I remember we were studying together, and he did, he got his GED, and I was really impressed with that. But he could literally take a car apart and put it back together. He invented these tools that would go around, the radiator or whatever is under the hood, tools to go around them. And I remember Tommy telling me that he probably should have patented them, but he was brilliant in that way.
And so what did he do for a living?
Well, he had a service station. He had several. The names kept changing because he had a service station across the street from our house, and
What were those names?
well, it was Esso, and then Exxon, and then Texaco. So it kept changing names, but.
And how did he get that service
Well,
station?
actually, our next door neighbor was a man named Zeno Boudin, who was very, I guess, well-to-do for that town, and he liked Dad a lot. And his daughter was Mert Cabral, and he was very strict with Mert, and she wanted, back in the day, they would have, I guess, chaperones to go out to clubs and go out dancing, and Zeno trusted Dad to drive his daughter, excuse me, and her friends to the clubs. So he got to know Dad really well, and thought he had a lot of potential. So I am not sure if he gave Dad the money to buy that service station or he loaned it to him, but I know he had it when he was very young. When he was first married.
And so this service station, it was right across the street
Right across the street from our
his
house.
And what do you think was most important to Grandpa?
I think his family, without a doubt. He had an amazing sense of humor, and I think he created a bond between everybody in the family. He was what you would call a raconteur, which means he was a storyteller and a story maker. And he was able to talk about any subject. I was amazed by how much he knew about baseball. He didn't like football at all, but he could tell stories and jokes, and he had an amazing sense of humor, and people loved him for that.
And did he have any farm animals on his property?
Oh my gosh.
Any
It's funny you
stories?
should bring that up. He had all kinds of animals. Well, he had a chicken coop. I'm trying to think when I remember growing up, and Papa had a barn, and he had rabbits and cows and pigs and all that. And then Dad, of course, lived next door, and he had pigs and he had chickens and he had roosters, and he had a goat that was was like a pet to us, Who has goats? Think about that a minute. And I remember one time Tommy was talking to Dad, and he had a pet rabbit. Tommy had a pet rabbit, and Daddy had rabbits, and Tommy adopted one and even named it. And he told me one time, he said, "Pat, let me tell you something." He said, this was, he was born when I was a junior in high school, so I really left when, he was a baby. But he told me later in his adult life, he said, "You know what? We had to be careful what we were eating, because Dad told me at one point that I was eating my pet rabbit." and then Cindy and I used to joke that Dad would kill everything, any kind of animal, bird. One time he killed like 100 robins, which was against the law. I could have been put in jail. And we ate robins, I guess. And Cindy saw an armadillo in the middle of the road one day, and she's like, "We need to throw that away before Dad finds it."
Speaking of, would he sneak any other interesting meats into the gumbo that we weren't aware of?
Probably alligator. I don't know. I have no idea. Frogs. Well, we ate fried frog legs, and I thought they were chicken, but they were delicious at some point. I found out.
I remember one story. We were eating one of his gumbos, and he said, "Alicia, you like that gumbo? It tastes good." I said, "Yeah, Grandpa, it tastes really good. What's in it?" He said, "Well, I was walking across the street to the Texaco station this morning, and I was watching this squirrel. And I was watching this squirrel go along the phone line, and next thing I know, I see that squirrel get electrocuted and fall, and me all fat, I'm not going to waste that meat." Well, guess what we were eating?
Typical.
All right, so when and When and how did he pass? What did he pass from?
I remember it was 2007, and I was, this is a year I retired. And I remember being in church one Sunday afternoon, and it was about 1 o'clock. We had just gotten out of Mass, and I told your dad that I had this weird feeling about Dad, and I didn't know why. I called home, and they said nothing's wrong, and I thought, I've got to go home. So I threw some stuff in a bag, I jumped in the car, and I left at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I think I got there at like 11, and when I got there, they told me he had been hospitalized. So it was this premonition, or intuition. So then I got to spend the last week of his life with him.
And what did he pass from? And what was the date?
He had, this is what really upset me. He had a checkup in February, and he was fine. And I remember going to see him in the hospital, and I met with the doctor, and I said, "What's wrong with him?" And he said, "Pat, he has 5 types of cancer." I was like, "There's no way." I said, "He had a clean bill of health in February." He says, "This is how it happens." And he had dementia and Alzheimer's for 12 years, which is a very typical pattern. And I'm sure that advanced his condition. But I do remember that I went to the doctor, maybe the 5th day he was in the hospital, and I said, "Is my dad going to make it?" He says, "No." I said, "I'm going to take him home. I want him to come home. So, what do I need to do?" And he said, "You tell me what to do." And I managed to get him home that day. And we set up a hospital bed in the living room. And I remember the whole family being around him, around the hospital bed when he died. And we were praying and telling him goodbye one by one.
And what date was that?
Oh gosh, let me think about this. July 17th, 2007.
And so who were his parents, and what do you remember about them?
We called him Mom and Pop Jean, Laurent Dugas, and wow, it's been so long, I can't remember her name. What do I remember? They lived maybe about a half a mile away, and I do remember that. They both loved to dance, and Pop Jean had animals, farm animals, and he had this house on the side of, behind his house, and he had all these things that they used to, what do you call it, kill animals and, butcher them. And he and Dad would do that because back in the day, that was our source of meat. And then Mom Jean was a gifted seamstress, and I remember being very quiet, but they were very special people.
And were they both born in Louisville?
Yeah, they were both born in Louisville.
Do you remember when and how each of them passed?
You know what? I know they died. Gosh, I've been gone so long. I'm trying to remember. I know Mom Jean was alive when Mom Wick died, because I remember her driving down the street, and I ran out of Mom Wick's house to tell her. But I think Pop Jean had died earlier, pretty sure.
And so, regarding your parents, what were their political beliefs?
Oh, everybody in that town was, they were all Democrats, conservatives, I guess you could say.
And if Grandma and Grandpa had a message to you and their grandchildren, what do you think it is?
A message to their grandchildren. I think they would say that life and family life is so important, that forging relationships with your family is probably the most important thing you can do in your life, because they did that, and I think that was their legacy to us. That we shouldn't, we should not. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is we should enjoy our life with our families and not take anything for granted.
And what other relatives do you remember having contact with growing up?
Well, Nanny Sybil was my godmother, and she lived 3 houses down from us. And the more I think about it, the more I think how we were alike. I remember
that was on your maternal or paternal?
that was Dad's sister, Dad's only sister. And interestingly enough, Mom had one brother, and Dad had one sister, which was very unusual back then because most people had large families. So anyway, I called her Nanny because she was my godmother, and I remember going over there and sitting at her kitchen table and talking, and she also was an amazing seamstress, and she always wore these sexy things. I remember her sitting on the front porch, and she had these long red fingernails, and she'd wear this strapless sundresses, and she would sit there with her fan, her Scarlett O'Hara fan, sitting on the front porch watching traffic. And to this day, I think about her personality. She was vibrant and funny and smart, and beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Did she marry and have
Yeah,
children?
she married Uncle Pike, and he worked in the oil fields, and he did very well. He did very well, and she had 3 children.
And so, what stories did you hear about earlier ancestors whom you never knew?
Wow. Earlier ancestors.
For instance, if any were immigrants or
No,
came from other countries.
No, there were. All the ancestors I remember, lived in Lorville, and I was a baby when Mom Wick's mother died. I don't remember anything. I know that Pop Wick's dad was Hazard Vaughn, but I don't remember anybody saying anything about them.
And spell
About the
Vaughn?
ancestors. Vaughn.
And so, what knowledge do you have of your family history, where it traces back to, what countries it may have descended from?
Nobody's ever done research or genealogy on that. I'm assuming that perhaps our family were Acadians who came down from Nova Scotia, but nobody's ever really researched that.
And so, tell us what it means to you to be a Cajun.
Well, Cajun is a corruption of the word Acadian, and sometimes it's used in a derogatory manner, but I never really thought about it that way because to me it is the French culture that is predominant in Louisiana, and it's about food and family and music and dancing. And if you think about what Cajuns contributed to the culture, that's what it is. It's about strong family ties and a belief in Catholicism, a very strong religious belief, about music, a great music tradition there, and I think the family gatherings, I still see that when I go back to Louisiana, that these families get together and have we call it dinner in Louisiana at noon with their whole families, and go on trips together. And I think that's a great legacy that Acadians have left the world.
And so, how many children were in your family, and where were you in the lineup?
Okay.
And I think you have a picture of the
Yeah,
whole family.
seven children. Here we are. I was number 1 in many ways. Me, Cindy, Wanda, Mert, Willette, Laureen, and the only boy, Tommy.
All right. And describe what your siblings were or are like, and who are you closest to?
Okay, this is a picture of Cindy. She's so beautiful. She died when she was 61. She had a stroke, and her birthday is October 31st. She was born in 48. She was an amazing woman. I remember she read all the time, and after she died, she was actually living in Mom Wick's house. She had lived in Texas, and she'd gotten a degree in media. Well, as a librarian, she worked at a college in, I think, Clear Lake City, and then she moved to North Carolina after Des was older. But what I wanted to say is, after Cindy died, Des was, at Mom Wick's house where Cindy had been living, and we went through her book collection, and I was just amazed at the things she read, because we had read the same thing. I had all the same books she had on philosophy, mythology, contemporary literature, because, in comparative religions, which I taught, and I thought, it made me very sad, because I moved away when we got married in 1968, about 69 actually. We moved to Houston, and then we moved to Lake Charles, and then to Atlanta, so I never really got to talk with her and see her very much after that.
And what did she die of, and when?
She had a stroke. You could ask me these dates. Let me think about that.
Did she have
She
cancer?
died, I want to say she died in 2008.
Did she have cancer?
No, she did not have cancer. She had Hodgkin's lymphoma in the 70s, and she had radiation, and back in the day they could not target it, so it really destroyed all of her salivary glands and her muscles in her neck, so she was not really well after that, and she lived till she was 61, but I think all that contributed maybe to the stroke that she had.
Your other siblings?
Wanda Mae Dugas. Wanda Mae Dugas Broussard.
Hold it in front of your... All right.
Wanda was born in 52. Yeah. Anyway, she's sister number 3, and she's the only blonde in the family, as you can see. She looks like a movie star right here. She's so beautiful. And she was brilliant in her own way, too. She's just, I think, has more common sense than anybody else. She has an amazing sense of humor, a beautiful spirit. She's a good mother, loved to cook, read prolifically, and she still does. And, she reads, I get her subscription to National Geographic every year, and she reads it cover to cover. And we talk about, the similarities we have in reading, but she's probably the sister I'm closest to now, because she's in St. Martinville, and, when we bought that house in St. Martinville, I got to see her a lot, so I go pick her up, almost every day that I'm there, and we have a very close relationship, which makes me happy, since I moved away from home so many years ago. And then I'm trying to find a picture of Mert. I know I have a picture in here somewhere.
It's the last one you just had.
Yeah, this is Mert. Mary Mercedes Dugas.
Hold on. All right.
And she, Mert is, I guess you could call a free spirit. And she's very happy. She's always happy. I think about when I see her now, the times that I'm in Louisiana and I talk to her, she's just, whatever situation Mert is in, she's a very clever person. She loves to go to Goodwill, and she finds the most amazing things there. I drop her off at Goodwill, and she can stay there for 3 hours. And she buys these clothes, and whatever you can stuff in a bag is $5. So if I give her $20, or she has $20, she comes out with garbage bags full of clothes. But that's her thing, is just rummaging through clothing. And I don't get to see her as much as I would like, because she lives in Louisville and Wanda's in St. Louis, so it's easier to pick her up. But she's an amazing grandmother. Candace and Cassidy are her grandchildren, and she really helps a lot with raising them and educating them. And Willette. Hang on. Where's the picture of Willette? Oh, here. Willette and I were actually on a cruise together. She's number 5, sister number 5. And this is actually a picture of her family when they visited us. Went to Helen, Georgia together.
All right.
You know, Willette and Laureen and Tommy were born when I was much older. And although I was still living at home, I was so engrossed in high school. I mean, I remember, I made straight A's. I wanted to learn because that education was very important to me. And I know that I was in everything. I was president of clubs. I was, played flute and piccolo in the band. I was a majorette. I was president of FHA. I was, officer in all these organizations. And so they, Willette and Laureen and Tommy were very young. So I don't remember a lot about them when they were growing up. But I became closer to Willette when she got older. And she has a beautiful family. She lives next door to Nadine, her daughter, and has 2 beautiful grandchildren, and married this wonderful man named Ken Bonet. And then, of course, there's Laureen, and here's a picture of her. She's beautiful. It's not the most flattering picture of her, but it happens to be the only one I have at this moment.
With a drink in her hand.
With a drink in her hand. Actually, you know what? This was actually on our boat. It was her 50th birthday, and I talked her into coming to see us. So she was on the houseboat. She brought Paulette with her, and Laureen is unleashed. That's all I can say. At least you remind me a lot of her. Always said you were really Laureen's daughter. She's got an amazing sense of humor. Everybody loves her. She's a wonderful mother and grandmother. I'm very happy that she moved into St. Martinville. She lived out in Cypress Island, and she moved into St. Martinville, so she's much closer to her grandkids and Mert and Wanda. She's an amazing cook. She probably has 3,000 friends on Facebook. I honestly think when those things pop up on Facebook, they say add friend, this one's from China, this one's from India, this one's from Sri Lanka, this one's from Guatemala. No, seriously, because if you ever look at her Facebook page, I can't even talk about some of the things she talks about, but we love her because of her personality. And then Tommy, the only boy. Tommy was born when I was, let me think about that, 67. Yeah, 63. So I would have been a junior in high school. So he was really 1 year old when I left. So I do remember rocking Tommy at night and singing Little Robin Redbreast to him and changing his diaper, and, that he was an infant. He was basically 2 years old or 1 year old actually, maybe 2, when I left to go to college. So as I said, I missed out on him growing up. And if I had to say the most brilliant person in the Vaughn and Dugas families, it is Tommy. He has an eidetic memory. Can you imagine anybody reading encyclopedia from beginning to end? And that's what he did. We had World Book encyclopedias, Britannic encyclopedias, and if I ask Tommy a question, I need to be prepared to sit there for 2 hours because he will have an Einsteinian answer. So we've gotten pretty close now that we're adults, and he married a girl from France. He was
What's her name?
Anne Claire. I actually don't know her maiden name, but they live in Vienna, Virginia right now. But she was a stewardess for Air France, and I remember him telling me that he was head of security at the airport, and somebody in my family, I'm not going to say who, said that Tommy actually shot dogs on the runway. That was his job, to making fun of him. I don't know if I've ever told him that, but he was in the aviation industry for a long time, and he works for a French company at this point, but he is absolutely brilliant. I mean, it is so amazing when you have a conversation with him. Everything you ask him, he knows the answer to. And sometimes I have to practice questions because I'm thinking, there's no way he knows the answer to this. But we talk a lot. I just actually sent him a book that I bought on Amazon, and it's about the history of Louisiana during the Confederacy. Well, early Louisiana through the Confederacy till now, and it is an encyclopedic book. And I remember skimming through most of it. I only read the chapters about our part of Louisiana, and I sent it to him for his birthday, and he was so excited. He said, "I found this book at Tulane Library, and they would not let me check it out, and I had to sit in the library and read it." So who would have thought that I would find a book like that? Mm-hmm. And I bought it on Amazon, and I thought, let me just send it to Tommy. And he knew exactly, what book it was. So I thought that was pretty strange. Serendipity is what you would call it.
And so give us an idea of the house you grew up in. Describe your room. What was your house like?
Well, I grew up in 3 houses. I grew up in Mom Wick's house, which their house was really big when I think about it now. You walked in the front door. Well, I remember the front porch was a smooth cement. It had been painted red. And then you walked in the front door, and there was they call it shotgun, but it was a really wide living room and kitchen area. Living room, dining room, kitchen area. And then the laundry room was in the back. And on the side was one huge bedroom that 2 double beds in it, and the back room was a double bed. And then she had, on that side of the house, we called it the glass porch because it was added on, and there were windows all the way around. So she would sit at the front window facing Main Street and sew, and she could see everybody. And I remember reading about this somewhere, but there was a train wreck in Lorville. It had to have been maybe in the late 40s, and they told everybody they could have this knotty pine wood, train loads full of knotty pine, and that's what they built the glass porch with, knotty pine. And you could find knotty pine wood in almost every house in Lorville. Is that amazing? Mm. But and then we spent, when I was born, we maybe lived with Mom and Pop 3 years, and then I'm not sure if Dad had the house behind the garage built or if we just moved into it. But I do remember you walked in the front door, and it used to be a living room, but Mom and Dad made a bedroom out of it because they kept having children, and then we had a small kitchen behind it, and then a laundry room, and clotheslines, like 10 clotheslines, because back in the day they didn't have a dryer, so we would hang clothes on the lines and bring them in, and Mama would have stacks of clothes from all the kids on her bed. But then our bedroom was on the left side of the house, and it was rectangular, and I want to say there were maybe 4 beds in it. So that's where both sides of the room, the children slept in. And then we had a front porch that we had a swing there. And we used to sit on that swing, and Mom and Dad would say the rosary, and we would recite it. That's amazing to have grown up that way, that childhood. And then after, I want to say when Mert was 2 years old, we moved into the house across the street. It was truly a shotgun house. I mean, this is where, they call it that because if you shot a gun through it, it would go from the front door to the back door. But it basically was a house that was, lengthy and not as wide. So you walked in the house to the living room, and there was a sort of counter there, and then an open dining room and kitchen and a laundry room in the back. And then on this side, there were 3 bedrooms and Mom and Dad's front bedroom, the girls' bathroom, we call it the girls' bathroom, and then a middle room, and then Mom and Dad's room and their bathroom. So, I guess when Tommy came, I was gone. So, it's like everybody was shifting rooms. I remember when I was in high school, he had a baby bed in that room, but by that time, there were 6 children. So I remember Cindy and I sleeping in single beds in the front room. And so Wanda, Mert, and Willette would have been in the middle room, and then Tommy's crib in there. And I guess when I left, everybody shifted.
And so what were your duties around the house as a child?
My duties. Well, this is what I remember. As I said, Mom had 3 maids. However, it didn't matter how late we stayed out on Friday nights. She would wake us up on Saturday morning at 7 o'clock. But she had this silver tray, and she put these little demi-tasse coffee cups on it, and she would go to each room and serve us coffee in bed. Can you imagine that? That's such a memorable experience for me. And then she'd go in the other room, and then, of course, we had to get up. That was the point. And I remember we would wash walls, scrub floors, wax floors, do laundry, hanging on the line, fold clothes. And Saturday, everybody cleaned. And my duty, remember on Saturdays, was to get all the kids' clothes ready for Mass. So we had 6 or 7 children. And so I'd, get all the little dresses and the petticoats and all the little patent leather shoes lined up to go to Mass on Sunday.
So do you have any favorite stories from when you were growing up? Favorite games, believe or make believe, or favorite toys?
I don't remember playing with toys. I never played with toys. Just kidding. I remember us playing marbles on the wooden floors like it was a rainy day. I remember, it's so funny how they say that your sense of smell will evoke memories. And I remember, like, Mom, every time I smell bread baking, I think of Mom Wick. She baked bread from scratch. But I remember those rainy days. There was kind of a musty smell outside. And, the house was closed up because, you didn't have air conditioning back then. And we would sit on the floor and play jacks. Do you even know what that is? Mm-hmm. Okay. Play jacks or pick-up sticks. And I do remember that being a game. And then we had this game called Save the Country. And I'm not really sure what it was. I just remember we went out in the yard and we chased each other. I don't remember why it was called Save the Country. But I really don't remember any other games that we played.
So what were your family's economic circumstances?
Well, let me tell you something. When I got older, I thought Dad had been a drug dealer or something, because how did he do that? He had 7 children. We had beautiful clothes. He had a new car almost every year, and he had a truck. He had a service station. I'm thinking, how in the world could he have, raised 7 children on that salary? And then he and Mom started traveling when all the kids were gone, and they went everywhere. I mean, they went to every state in the Union. They go to Cancun. They went to Mexico. I mean, all different places. So, I don't know. we went to the beach every single summer for a week. And I remember Dad, we were so excited about getting to Galveston, and he would stop halfway. Well, when we saw the beach, he would stop and let us run on the beach, get sand all over the car. And, we stayed in these stilted houses where you drive the car under. And, I think, I remember my friend Jackie Judy saying, we're at Dad's funeral, and it's a common thing there to put pictures of, the whole family when somebody's deceased, and you put it at the funeral home. And I was looking at this picture of me, and I looked like I had a Russian babushka on. And I looked at Jackie and I said, Jackie, we look so poor. He said, Pat, we were all poor. I'm like, no, we weren't. We had new cars, we went to the beach, we had nice clothes. He said, in today's circumstances you would say that, but we were well fed, we had close families, we knew everybody in town, everybody had the same, you didn't really think of rich people. We're all in a way in the same economic bracket, I guess.
So do you remember any times when money was tight?
No, not for me.
Do you remember having to do without things you wanted or needed?
Never. Honestly, never. I don't. And, Daddy used to joke, the cash register at the service station, I would go in and I'd take money out of it and punch paid out. And I would take money because Mama would say, go get $10 or something, and then I would record it. Just write it down, And I remember Dad never told me that, but I think Dad said that he was going broke from all the paid outs you had. But no, I don't ever remember wanting something and not having it. Never. Never.
What did you love to do as a kid in your spare time?
As a child?
As a child.
In my spare time? Well, I just remember playing with a lot of friends, playing outside, swinging. I do remember Mom managed to take us to the swimming pool in New Iberia. How she did that in the summer, like almost every day to swim. I do remember her doing that. And just playing outside. I do remember that. That's all we did was play outside. We didn't have toys. What we did, I don't know, just ran. I have no idea.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I just, maybe, here's the deal. When I was growing up, when I was in high school, very few people in my class went to college. Maybe 5 out of a class of 22 or 24. But most people were going to be a teacher or a nurse. Nobody went into engineering or, college professors and all that. In fact, some of the most, I was third in the class. I'd always been, ranked second until this girl moved from another city, and they had AP classes, so she bumped me down to third, which I'll never forgive her. And I tell her that every time I see her in Louisville. We laugh about it. Huh?
But you're not bitter.
Oh, never. I've never been bitter. And we laugh about it when and you know what? Here's the deal. She has 5 children, and she sits on the porch shelling peas. And there's cows in the backyard. So she's nice, but I just think she was brilliant. And it's sad that she didn't go to college. But she's happy. But I do remember that most of, people that I knew later, not in my class, but people I met later, were either nurses or teachers. And so, I don't know. I guess maybe because I was so studious, that was something I decided I wanted to do. And I didn't even realize how much I loved it till I started teaching.
And so when did you learn to cook, and who taught you? Or were there any special family foods or recipes that you remember?
Well, as I said, I remember Mom cooking, and I watched her cook and bake. And every Sunday, we'd have these, as I said, in Louisiana, the whole family gets together, and we have these wonderful Sunday meals after church, and she would just whip up all kinds of stuff. And Larry tells me that all the time. You can whip up something in 5 minutes. But I watched the maid, our domestic, we called her Mrs. Bob Vital, and she would cook and I would watch her, and I watched Dad. But seriously, I didn't start cooking till I was married, and I guess I didn't know how to cook that well because I remember we were living in that little duplex apartment in Lafayette. Larry was still in college and I had graduated, and I went to the grocery store to buy a chicken, and I asked the man who owned it, I said, I can't afford very much, what should I buy? He said, well, buy the whole chicken. It's cheaper than buying the cut up parts. So, and I guess I should say that Papa had a grocery store, so I would just go across the street and get stuff for Mom and Mom Wick, and they would cook it. So anyway, I go home, and I don't know how to cut a chicken, so I slapped that thing on a wooden board, and I got a hatchet and a hammer, and I sliced it. I just sliced it through the bone and everything. And we had just gotten married, and I set the table with our fine china and crystal and silver, and had flowers and candles, and your dad came home, and he's like, oh, this is wonderful, thank you. So we sat down to eat, and he starts eating the chicken, and it's crunchy. And he looked at me, and I took a bite, and I looked at him, I said, I'm so sorry. And I just burst out crying. And he's like, so, this is a memory, a funny memory, but I guess it goes to show you that I didn't really know how to cook as well as I don't know, I just learned. Maybe it's something that's culturally part of you, that you absorb all these things when you're growing up and watching other people cook. But honestly, I don't think Mom cooked a day in her life. I'm serious. She had a domestic, as I said, who cooked, and then Dad cooked. So I remember her making biscuits in the morning, but I don't remember her ever baking or cooking. Maybe potato stew she'd cook once in a while.
And so I know your family age range with your siblings, varied, but do you recall what activities your family would do together growing up?
Eating, going to church. What activities? My God, there was 7 children. As I said, every time I turned around, there was another kid in the house. So I was like, I don't know.
So would you say birthing? Breeding?
Excuse me?
Breeding? Being the Catholic family?
What was the question?
What activities in the family? I guess you wouldn't do that together, never mind. Okay, we'll move on to the next question.
Oh my God. Oh gosh.
What would y'all do for Christmas? Like any holidays, Thanksgiving, birthdays?
Okay, stop. Okay, Christmas. This was Christmas. We always had a fresh Christmas tree, and we called it the picture window in Mom's house because this was so amazing. You could stand anywhere in the kitchen, the dining room, or the living room and look through the picture window and see Dad's garage. Wasn't that amazing? Mm-hmm. And so, and I remember when Mom got sick, she would sit in that chair and look at the garage. It made me really sad, because he had died. But anyway, Christmas was very simple. Oh my gosh. Like I said, we probably got pick up sticks and marbles. Who cared? It was simple back then.
So the kids would come running out of their rooms?
Yeah, and I remember pictures in our pajamas and everything and ripping open presents. But we always had lots of presents, but they weren't expensive things. And I don't know how Mom did that, because I'm thinking, I try to get organized for Christmas. I have 2 children and, 2 grandchildren and, various friends of theirs. And so, and I try to get ahead of wrapping. How did she do that? How did she wrap gifts for 7 children? I don't know. And keep it hidden from us. I don't know when she did it. But our Christmases were very simple. We always had, as I said, open our gifts early in the morning. And I just remember that it was special. It was such a a warm family tradition that Mom and Dad created for us that, I don't know, it's different now. I think because when you're growing up and you remember being little, it's those traditions that you try to create for your children and grandchildren. You said Thanksgiving? Wow. Well, I do remember, I do remember having Thanksgiving when I was younger at Mom Wick's, because when the children were younger, we would have most of our holiday things, dinners and things there. But,
And birthday parties, would that be it?
yeah, well, we didn't have them at McDonald's. We had them in the backyard, in the house, We didn't go out to have birthday parties. We just had, simple parties in Mom Wick's house, in our house, invited our closest friends.
So let's move on to some of your favorite topics. So give us an idea, growing up, where would you shop? Where would you get your food,
Oh my gosh.
your clothing?
Okay, here's the deal. When I was older, Mom didn't have time to shop. Okay, and I think that's where I got my love of shopping from. But she basically gave me a blank check and money to go shopping on Saturday, and I had a list this long to go to New Iberia, which is 10 minutes away to go to the stores. And so I started. Okay, I went to Mangles. Mangles was, I don't even know how to. It was like a latter day sort of TJ Maxx. It's less expensive clothing, and I was tiny at that time, and for some reason, I don't know, maybe tiny clothes were less expensive, but I would always buy a couple of dresses. And then Abdallah's was like the Neiman Marcus in New Iberia. It was a very expensive store, so we'd only buy very special things there. But as I said, Mom Wick would make my prom dresses, but we didn't wear pants to school. I mean, everyone wore dresses when I was in high school. I don't ever remember wearing pants to high school. So, I would go and I would shop at, what do you call Woolworths, the 5 and dime store, and, get stuff Mom needed. And we didn't have any big box stores. They're all family owned. So, I'd probably get home with a carload of stuff, that she would give me a list to buy. But that was my thing. That's where it started. I blame her for my shopping addiction.
And so what's the largest town or city you remember visiting when you were young? What were your impressions of it?
The largest town? Well, I remember going to New Orleans, but I'm trying to remember. And on our senior trip, I want to say we went to Biloxi, to the beaches on a class trip. But, we went to Galveston every summer, but it's not like we saw the city, we were just going to the beach.
And so tell us what school was like for you. What were your favorite subjects, your least favorite, what was hard for you, easy
Wow,
for
I could
you?
start from grade 1. I remember my teacher, Mrs. Gosselin, she would play piano for us and, start our singing. And of course, Louisville's a small town. The classes are very small. And you knew every single child in there. She did. She knew the parents, the grandparents. So it's a very warm situation. I do remember in Camille and, oh my gosh, this is funny. Camille and her sister Antoinette, can't remember the last names, Boutte. And they were, okay.
Spell that?
Boutte. I didn't even realize how that sounded. Oh my gosh. Oh wait,
Sure.
I have to tell you this. So Camille was tall and thin and had gray hair. And they were like Jack Sprat and his wife. And Antoinette was huge and she had black hair. And so Camille was very stern, and she would sit at her desk and she wore these sleeveless dresses. And one day her strap on her slip fell down and she got some scissors and just cut it off. It's funny what you remember. And then Antoinette was always stressed out, and she had a bottle of Coke on her desk and she dropped aspirin in it. Isn't that crazy? And you know what she did? This was the most horrible teaching thing I can ever remember. In geography, she would assign each of us a paragraph to memorize. Seriously? A paragraph on Ethiopia, and I'm supposed to memorize it and stand in front of the class and say it? How the heck did that teach you anything?
The sheet of paper.
Did she? But wait, let me finish. Okay, so I don't remember middle school that much. High school, oh my gosh, I loved high school. I used to stay up until 2 and 3 in the morning studying. I wanted to get an A in everything, but I don't know. I even took calculus. I don't know why, because I hated math. I think because the cute guys were in there, and they were mostly on the football team. And I remember the coach doing plays on the board. He'd write plays, and I'm thinking, seriously, help me with my calculus. But I remember Mr. D, my biology and chemistry teacher. Everybody had a crush on him. He was so cute. He was young, and he had black hair and green eyes. And I always used to sit on the front row because I wanted him to notice me. But I liked all my classes. And then I had an amazing English teacher in my senior year. Gosh, what was her name? She was an alcoholic. But I remember she was very stern. And she would literally make us read Macbeth and Hamlet. And, when I started teaching British Lit, I'm thinking, that's unbelievable. I mean, I had such good teachers in Loreville. And I think that's why I did so well in college, because you would think a school with 200 kids max, from grades 1 to 12, how did that happen? I don't know. I just think about it. There was a parochial school in New Iberia, and then it wasn't integrated. The one in Loreville, so there's a black school and then our school. So I guess if you put them all together, it'd be a lot of students. But as I said, I think our teachers knew every one of us, and our parents and grandparents. I remember I was the only one of my friends who had a car in my senior year, and we wanted to sneak out of school to go to lunch somewhere. So we all piled in my car. By the time we got to the stop sign on the side of school, Dad was standing there waiting for me. So what do you think happened? Somebody saw me leave, called Dad, whose service station was a half a mile away, and I thought, oh Lord, that didn't work.
So would you say...
Oh wait, I have to tell you this too. Mm-hmm. Mrs. Lalonde was our home ec teacher. Nobody teaches home ec anymore. She taught us to cook and sew. I literally won first place at all the sewing contests in the 4-H club. I was president of 4-H club. But, I made all these clothes, and I learned, I was like Mom Wick, and I was making your clothes and Braden's clothes, my maternity clothes. I made the drapes in every house we had. This was before things were less expensive in the stores. So I just remember Mrs. Lalonde, and she wore what was called a postage stamp girdle. Now, you don't know what that is, but it's an old-fashioned girdle that you put on, and it sucks you all up and makes you look thin. And she was like this. She was like a bean. But she was very, very stern. But it's funny because I think of her as kind of a movie star person, but she was teaching home ec. And so she came to me one day and she said, I want you to enter this Betty Crocker homemaker contest. I'm like, I don't even know how to cook. She said, it's just a test, Pat. So I went home and I studied for I don't know, maybe 2 months, because it was a test at the end of the year, and I came out first in state. As I said, I couldn't bake a pie to save my life.
So would you say it was okay for girls to be smart at your school?
It wasn't like now. It wasn't competitive. I think that we were competitive with ourselves. I don't ever remember being, jealous of someone who was, elected president or something. I just think that we were so close to each other. We applauded everybody's successes. I don't remember anything like that in high school.
So who were your friends in high school? What did y'all like to do together?
Well, Mary Beth was my best friend, Mary Beth Rubin. She was a drum major. I was a majorette, and she was a drum. She wore that big tall hat and, the baton and everything. And she lived 3 doors down from me. And, she was my best friend. And then Claudette Gonsolin, lived on the way to New Iberia, and she was beautiful. And she died in her 30s. I think she had, well, I'm not sure what kind of cancer, but it was just, I had moved away. I mean, I was living in Atlanta at that time, and I couldn't go to her funeral, but that was really sad. And then I had a lot of other friends, but they were my two closest ones.
So were there different groups, like cliques at your school, and like which did you belong to?
You know what?
And how do you think you were
I
perceived
never
by
really,
others?
I never really thought about cliques, but we had our groups. Like, okay, I was popular, okay, but we didn't think about popular. Like I hear kids today, so like Talia will say, well, she's in the popular group. I never really thought about it till I left school, but, you know, I guess those of us who dated different people, you know, or got asked to prom, well, that's like today, got asked to prom, to homecoming, you know, I guess maybe those are the popular kids, but I do remember, as I said, I had the only car at my friends, and we had a group of maybe 10 friends, like my class and the class below us, and I would drive everybody to the drive-in, you know, just a bunch of girls, and then we meet up with guys there, but, you know, just, you know, watch the movies. And then I remember that we didn't have enough money for everybody to pay, so someone would hide in the trunk of my car. And I do remember I didn't have anything to do with it. Somebody brought bourbon and Coke once, and they drank it. I'm sure I didn't, because I was such a goody two-shoes.
So would you say, like, were you part of the nerdy group, the athletes, the band?
No.
Did you go to band camp?
I played basketball, okay? No, I didn't go to band camp. What are you talking about? Nobody went to band camp. This is Lorville. Seriously. No. I played basketball 4 years. Look, I said it. I played basketball. I played softball, which I wasn't very good at. You know the thing you had to do the bat? You know what I'm talking about? You held the bat and you went like this. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Okay, I have no idea what that meant. That's what an athlete I was.
So do you ever remember any teasing or bullying of you or anyone else at the school?
Oh, no. No, I don't remember that at all. Oh, actually, I do remember this girl. I don't want to say her name, but she was from a family of 12 children. They didn't have a lot of money, and I do remember some kids being mean to her, but it's like we all protected each other, you know? I don't know that really happens a lot. I don't remember having any enemies or anybody like that. I mean, we liked everybody.
So, you know, what were your hobbies and interests? Did you read a lot? What kind of music did you listen to?
Well, you know what? We had those 45 records, and of course, you know, this was, oh gosh, I don't remember honestly the people I listened to, but I do remember when the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show, and Mom and Pop Week had one of the few televisions in the town, and all my friends and I were there on a Sunday night watching the Beatles, and I do remember that was, you know, that was a big deal. You know, that was music. But we went to clubs, but back in the day, I mean, you didn't drink. You either had a date and went dancing at clubs, and whatever music was popular in the 60s, I mean, that's when we were going out.
So did you have a particular dress style?
Whatever was in fashion, I wore it.
Which was, like, was that when they had greasers and...
Greasers? No, we never really...
cheerleaders and...
No, I mean, I don't remember.
Poodle skirts.
You know, like you say there were cliques in high school. I don't remember us having cliques, but yeah, of course we had poodle skirts, and we had, you know, the little, what do you call that, Peter Pan collar, and, you know, we went through fashion phases. What's that?
You know, if you wore gloves, I remember you
Oh,
talking
yes. Yeah, I mean, okay, Jackie Kennedy, imagine the way she dressed. This is how we dressed to go to Mass on Sunday. Everybody, I mean, I had the most beautiful hats. I had a hat, fur hats, all kinds of hats with veils, gloves, beautiful suits. I was probably one of the well-dressed kids. And, you know, I remember this one girl her family didn't have a lot of money, and she was going to be on the homecoming court. She came to ask me if she could borrow a hat. And no, that makes me sad, can you imagine? I never had to do that. I always had beautiful clothes.
So do you remember having any jobs during your teenage years?
You gotta be kidding me. With all the stuff I did? No. The most I did was check the books at the service station one day. No, I had no jobs. I didn't have time.
So did you ever contribute to the family income, or
Seriously? Income. I just spent it.
So if not, how did you
How could I
spend
have
your money?
income if I didn't work? I had my mom and dad's income. What?
How would you spend money during high school? Like,
Seriously,
what would you spend it on?
Well, we didn't have a lot of money. I mean, okay, think about this. We didn't have McDonald's. We didn't have Krispy Kreme. I mean, we had the little mom and pop stores, and I don't even, I guess because I always had money to buy what I wanted to, I never really thought about it. I mean, I had money for what I needed, but we didn't have expensive things to buy.
So what do you remember most about your teenage years? What first comes to mind?
Dancing. We had so much fun. I mean, even through college, there were so many places that you could go, so many nightclubs that, you didn't have to have an ID and you didn't drink. So you just went in. I mean, sometimes groups of girls would go to a club, like there's a place called Ignace Doucette's on the Levee. And it was just a nightclub, and we'd go on Sunday afternoon, and we go group of girls and be a group of boys there, and no boyfriends and girlfriends, just dancing. So Friday night we would go to Signorelli's in St. Morinville. Saturday night we'd go to the Oriental Club in New Iberia, and Sunday afternoon we'd go dancing. So we danced. That's all we did. Oh, we go to the Teenage Center before we could go into the clubs every Saturday night. So that's basically what we did. We all danced.
How would you say your relationship with your parents changed when you became a teenager? Did you have conflict with them? If you did, what was it
remember. I think I was a perfect child. I do not remember any conflict. Well, of course, I have this distant memory of Mom and I, I wasn't disrespectful, but having a conversation, a disagreement. I'm sure. I don't remember any of that. I remember one time we might have had but I'm sure, I was pretty spirited. I'm sure stuff like that happened, and I'm just trying not to remember it. Or maybe I just blocked it out.
And so, at what age did you start dating, and do you remember your first date?
Yeah. My first date was with Terry Edler. And he was just a guy in my class. Skinny. Nerdy.
And how old were you?
Well, it wasn't a date. We just met at the movies. The movie theater. Just meet at the movie theater.
How old were you?
And I was 13. I remember Dad telling Dad, Dad, Terry wants to hold my hand in the movies. And I said, should I? And he said, no, that's how babies are made. I swear, I did not hold hands with anybody until I was 16. Because, you have to remember the climate at that time. Nobody talked about anything. You didn't even say the word pregnant. I mean, it was just a very guarded a way of speaking. And so, yeah.
And so what would you say your parents' advice and rules were related to dating or
Seriously,
contact with the opposite sex?
Nothing.
Did they ever give you the birds and the bees lecture?
Seriously? Look, that never happened. I mean, I honestly don't think I even knew about the birds and the bees until I went to college. Nobody had that discussion with you.
So how did you learn about
Seriously,
sex?
I'm not telling you that.
Friends?
Yes, probably.
So what would you say your plans were when you finished school as far as education and
You mean
work?
high school?
High school.
Well, I'm definitely
You could be
Yeah.
high school or college.
I definitely knew I was going to college. Without a doubt. I planned to go to college. I was the first one in my family to have a college degree. So that was very important to me. I was terrified. I mean, seriously, Lafayette was 30 miles away, but I was leaving home to live in a dorm. And I was terrified. And I remember my first dorm, we had a suite and there were 5 girls in it. Mary Beth, my best friend, and I were there. There was a girl from Eunice and a girl from, I don't know, all these small towns, and 5 girls in a room. I would bring a light and study under the stairs like Harry Potter. Seriously, under the stairs I would study. You know, I never told Mom and Dad that, but I was so terrified of doing poorly in college that, you know, I was studying all the time. But, no, I mean, I did well, and
So when you graduated college, what were your plans?
well, I mean, obviously I had a degree in education, so I was going to teach, and I got a job immediately. I student taught at Lafayette Junior High, then I got a job at Scott High School, and then when Acadiana was built, which is the newest high school practically in Louisiana, big comprehensive school, I got a job there.
And so, what did your parents think about your plans as far as work and?
Probably so glad I was out of the house. They had 6 other kids to take care of. They're like, oh, thank God we got some more room in the bedroom for another kid. And she's not spending our money anymore. She's earning her own money.
So, did you or anyone else close to you serve in a war, and what do you remember about that experience?
You know, after I graduated from college, you know, and
Grandpa served in a war, correct?
oh, I thought you said my friends.
Anyone in your family?
Oh yeah, Dad was on Tarawa in World War II. He was a decorated soldier because he was, you know, had a Purple Heart and Bronze Star.
And what was the stories he would tell you about?
Nothing. I think it was too painful for him. The time I learned about Dad's experience was a book that some guy from Louisville published, and he interviewed all these men from Louisville that had served in the war, and I read that, and it was very sad, because to think my dad, who grew up in a little town, was on Tarawa, and then he was shipped to New Zealand. Can you imagine that? 17 years old. He lied about his age, you know, and one of his commanding officers knew it after they had, you know, left, and he offered Dad a cigarette, and he said, "You're probably too young to smoke." And he said, "No, I'm 18. He said, "No, you're not." So I think, you know, it was a war, and they, you know, everybody people were so patriotic then, and so Dad never spoke about it. He wouldn't tell me anything about it, but, you know, I never really asked him, but he never talked about it. I'm sure he must have talked to Tommy.
So why did he receive the Purple Heart? Was there
Because
something special that had happened or he had done?
No, because when you're wounded, that's just automatic. You get a Purple Heart if you're wounded during a, you know, service in the military. Oh, but there's a World War II museum in New Orleans, and I went to visit it, and I bought a brick. You can buy a commemorative brick, and his name's, you saw it, didn't you? Yeah.
And how was he wounded? Where?
On Tarawa. He was shot in the leg. Oh, and so they immediately shipped him out to California, and he was there for an entire year in this hospital. And the doctor who performed surgery on him was from New Iberia. Can you believe that?
Wow.
And that was just amazing story. He was such a hero, you know, to come back to Louisville after that experience. You know, I think of post-traumatic stress syndrome that they talk about now, and I don't remember seeing that in Dad. Nothing like that.
And so did you have any other family members that you recall may have served in the war?
Yeah, Pop Wick was served in World War I. He was in France. I think he was what do you call it, a driver for one of the, colonel or general or something. I'm pretty sure. I know he was a driver. I'm not sure what. And then Paran, my Uncle Rufus, he was my Paran, which means he's my godfather. I know he served, but I'm not sure. I don't remember where. I just remember seeing a picture of him in uniform. And they're the only ones I know of.
And so, going to the wars that have happened during your lifetime, did you support the war, support or oppose the war in Vietnam? And
Okay, you have to remember this.
mhm.
The war in Vietnam took place in the 70s, okay? Your dad and I were still, I'm sorry, got married in 68. I'm sorry, the 60s, okay, late 60s? Hang on a second, I'm getting confused here. No, your dad and I were not married because I remember that I would sit in front of the television and they would scroll the numbers of the men that they were going to call to go to Vietnam. Can you imagine watching that? And you're watching every day to make sure your boyfriend's number doesn't come up. And so your dad's did. And he was going to be drafted. And so his dad worked for a senator, and he managed to get your dad into the National Guard, or he would have been gone.
And so, how did you feel about the war in Vietnam? What were your views?
Well, okay, you have to remember, it was different. It's not like I was Jane Fonda. You know what I'm saying? It was Lorville. It was almost like it was something frightening, but it wasn't there. I don't remember we didn't have the kind of press we have now. Think about that. We didn't have the, television, with all these people talking about how bad the war was. I don't remember any of that. And I think that we were afraid. That's that was it. I don't think we really even understood it. I didn't till I got older.
And so tell us about how it was growing up in the Deep South prior to, during, and after integration.
What
are your memories?
Okay, my memory is that all the blacks that worked for my family, for Mom and Pop Wick, I remember this old man named Carlos, and he rode a horse down Main Street, and he would give us rides. Well, he would do odd jobs for Mom and Pop Wick, and I do remember, it makes me sad now, but they were taken care of. They were taken care of by the whites they worked for. But I remember him sitting on the steps in the back, eating, like they couldn't come into the house, and eat with us. And so that changed, I think, a little bit later, because I do remember when I was in high school that Mrs. Bob didn't want to eat at the table with us. She would wait till we stopped eating to eat. And I thought about that later, but you know what? I wanted her to come to our church when I got married, because no blacks did that. They never went to the white church. She sat in the front pew with my family. And when I walked out of the church, down the sidewalk, and I did that purposefully, instead of going that way to go to where the reception was at the hall, I walked purposefully down the sidewalk, and all these blacks were lined up on the street because they wanted to see me. So I knew something was not right about that, but then I didn't see blacks being abused. I mean, Miss Bob was like my mother. Mom went through a number of black domestics who raised us. And so they were like mothers to us. I know they were taken care of. They weren't paid very well, but they got clothes, or they got food.
Do you recall restaurants being segregated, or
yes, absolutely,
bathrooms?
Yes, I mean,
I
hate to admit this, but my dad has sign on the bathroom door at the service station that said whites only. And now that we're more cognizant about that, I feel terrible about it, but I think that when you are growing up in that kind of environment, it's a given. You don't understand the difference because you see people being, it wasn't the kind of racism that is blatant like now. You know, I mean, I do remember people saying some things about blacks, but not that often. I think that the ones that I knew, I mean, we would play with black children. But mostly they had menial jobs.
Do you remember when integration happened? Did it happen when you were in school, or was it after?
No, it was after. Yeah, it was after I graduated.
So, did you ever participate in, or do you have any memories of any of the movements that came out of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, such as the Civil Rights Movement, the Women's Liberation Movement, or the Gay Liberation Movement?
Really? Gay liberation movement? No. Nobody knew anything about that. I remember the marijuana movement. When I started teaching high school, the kids knew that, I was in college in the 60s, like, Miss Barr, do you smoke pot? And honestly, I swear, I never knew anybody who smoked pot. This was Louisiana. I mean, pot was coming from California to Louisiana. It took like 50 years to get there, I think. I don't even remember people doing that. So, we were not in that generation as politically active in Louisiana. You understand? And I'm not sure why. Because we didn't have Woodstock. That was way up in New York. We didn't live in LA where all these movements were beginning. And I think a lot of those things, happened. Think about the South. It was a different type of culture.
So the Civil Rights Movement was big in the South. Do you
But
have
it was
any
Alabama. Think about what happened. Do you hear anything happen in Louisiana by that? No. It was Alabama and Mississippi where all those, terrible tragedies were happening. Never anything about Louisiana. So, as I said, Rosa Parks and all that, I don't remember a thing about that. Nothing. I don't remember that. I don't remember it discussing it. I don't remember anybody talking about it.
And so when equal rights were implemented, you don't remember any discussions?
Nothing.
Do you remember a time when things started changing in your town?
Well, okay, let me just say this. I think in terms of integration, the predominant culture of hate was present in the news in Alabama and Mississippi. Do you remember? That? Where, Martin Luther King went there. Not formally, but I think informally blacks were reticent to go into a white restaurant. I mean, that was a total cultural change in the 60s, and maybe their fear was still there, that they would be, intimidated or I don't know.
So did you remember anyone in your family ever experiencing discrimination, or people that you worked for the family?
No, I don't.
Who were your role models growing up?
My parents and grandparents are my role models, but I think people outside of my family had a great effect on me were my teachers. Because I think that, okay, look, you have high schools now that have 3,000 kids. There were 24 kids in my class. So think about that a minute. You knew every single child. You got to know, and I started thinking about that when I started teaching. I had 32 kids in one class. But, how in the world could you know them in these huge cities? They knew us, they knew our parents, they knew our, abilities, our, inabilities. I think that my teachers really built me up because outside of my family, they knew me in a different way. They were trying to educate me, and they knew what my skills were, and they lifted me up. I think they inspired me to do well because they knew how much I valued an education. And not every kid, I think, expressed that in high school because, as I said, very few kids in my graduating class went to college, and there were some smart kids in my class.
So, do you remember your first contact with things and inventions like the radio, the television, the computer? And when did your family first buy these items?
Okay, I remember before we had a TV, I was little, and Mom used to put the radio on every morning. And there were stories. People told stories and sang songs, and it was like Mr. Rogers in the radio. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so they would read fairy tales, and I think now that when she did that, that must have had a real impression on me because I was literally learning. You know, they say cultural literacy is when you understand the idioms in society. Like if somebody says The Wizard of Oz, how could you not know what that is? I mean, you have to know the story. And I used to tell my students that all the time. You know, Miss Barra, why are you talking about Three Blind Mice? What is that? I was like, are you kidding me? They're nursery rhymes and fairy tales. And people make allusions to that. You need to understand them. So she was, probably without realizing it, you know, educating us in that way. So I do remember her playing the radio in the morning. And then I do remember that Mom and Pop Wicked, one of the first people to have a television. I told you that when the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show, you know, all my friends came over to her house to watch it. And then we saw Elvis Presley. She was mortified. She didn't have any clue. And we started, remember on the Ed Sullivan Show, they made a big deal about him, the way he shook and whatever. And so she got her rosary, and she got up to turn the TV off, and Pop Wick said, he called her May, because her name was May Segura. Let him, it's not, you know, it's not that bad. She was shocked because that was a big deal when Elvis was gyrating on stage. So yeah, I do remember that.
Do you remember your first computer?
Seriously? It was about this big. You mean at home? No. We have computers so I started teaching. I wanted to say I just remember we had a room. It was like IBM. It had computers to the ceiling. You know, what do you call that? What do you call it? The place where all the data's stored. Servers. Thank you. There were a room full of them. No, I want to say I was at Walton. That would have been 77. And I do remember maybe later, like 80s, early 80s, that we got computers and we were mortified. Oh, and you know what? You know how we did grades? We had those punch cards. You don't even know what that is, do you? You put a punch card into a computer and it would collect the data. And then you had to turn your punch cards in. I don't know. It was like the beginning of the computer world. We were mystified. It was like a big mystery. How are we going to learn this? Oh, and I remember this one teacher. They'd been teaching like 40 years, and I was department head, and she looked at me. She's like, "I'm going to die before you're going to have to kill me before I do this." You know what she did? She picked up the mouse and she talked to it. I'm serious. I was like, oh my gosh.
So tell us about how you met your spouse.
You mean your dad?
And how you knew he was the one. What was his name?
Lawrence Joseph Barra. Larry Barra. Well, okay. I've been dating a guy. We're very serious. And I was, let me think about that. It was December of my senior year. And, oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I was at a football game and I was a majorette. And Mary Beth and I were standing there and Jimmy LeVere was her boyfriend. And all of a sudden, you know, this guy comes up and he's Jimmy LeVere's best friend and he lives next door to Larry, your dad. And so, I don't know, we started talking and it was like, phew, that kind of thing it just happened, you know. It was, I don't even know how to describe it. It was
a little tingle in your jingle?
Leisha, seriously? Seriously? It was an intellectual connection.
Is that what
we
it was?
started. No, we started talking about Plato and Socrates immediately. Oh, but I remember he had a black leather jacket and like a fawn's haircut and those green eyes. Drop dead gorgeous. Plato and Socrates.
And so when and how did you decide to move in together and marry?
Move in together, then marry? Seriously? You mean
Yeah,
marry
I'm
and
just
move
saying,
in together?
How did that happen?
Well,
How long had you dated?
we dated from, we started dating in December of 63, and we dated 5 years, all through college. And then your dad went to Fort Ord in California when he was in the National Guard. And so, let me think about this. So I graduated in 68, and he gave me a ring in December because we'd been dating for 5 years, and I graduated from college. I'm like, really? I didn't say anything, but I think that when I started talking about plans, he gave me the ring and he said, well, we're going to wait till I graduate from college. And I'm thinking, what year was that going to be? So anyway, I started planning the wedding. I had bride magazines and picked out my china and silver. And he says, next thing you know, he's walking down the aisle and he's like, the hell happened?
And so at your wedding, did you wear a white dress or an off-color dress?
You know what? This interview's going to be cut off if you don't stop. Pure snow-driven, pure as a driven snow white.
Okay, so what was originally the most difficult for you about being married or in a relationship, and what was the most
Well, what was
satisfying?
the question? In a relationship or being married? Which one are you asking me?
Well, let's just say being married. What originally was the most? Did you have any hard times that you recall? When
Yeah,
you
the first hard
got
time.
married?
Yeah, I do remember that. Your dad went off to 6 weeks of National Guard camp in the summer, and he said you need to pay the bills. Well, seriously, I didn't know a checkbook from whatever, and so he didn't tell me how to pay the bills. And as I said, I just paid out on the cash register and got money. I didn't know how to handle money. So I paid every bill we had, full amount. We were owed John like $2,000 because we used to pay like installments, and he never told me that. So he comes back, he's like, what the hell happened? I'm like, what do you mean? So whatever. That was my first lesson in finances, which I never paid the bills again for the rest of our marriage.
So you wouldn't say your expertise in paying the bills has improved since?
I have never paid a bill.
So what is you and Dad's song? What would you say is your song when it comes on the radio?
Let's get it on. I'm just saying. Wait, you need
So
to
going
hear.
back
Wait,
to
you
when
want to
you
hear
got
my?
married,
You want to
did you
hear
wear
his?
the white dress?
You
and
want
the
to?
white
You want to hear? You want to hear? You want to hear his ringtone? I'm in the grocery store in public. Someone in line goes, "Let's get it on," and everybody's like. Well, no, we had a lot of favorite songs. I'm just kidding, but we had a lot of favorite songs. It just depends. Like, bells will be ringing. You know how you hear that Christmas song?
Did you say when a man loves a woman?
Yeah. Think about our generation. Those are all, they're classics, and that's one thing I'll say about our generation's music. The Jersey Boys. You know that. Have you ever seen that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, you understand that movie is classic. That music is classic, and it's not going to happen with the music of the generations after that, I promise you.
So what advice would you give to someone today who is contemplating a serious relationship?
Well, you know how they say opposites attract? I honestly think that's okay, because I think you'd be bored, seriously, because I think when you have differences, it's more exciting, so I'm very different from your dad. I'm very high strung, as you know, and I guess I can be volatile, although I'm near perfect. But I'd say he's the calmer person.
So you would say it's okay if there are opposites in a
Yeah,
relationship.
yeah. And I mean, I do think you have to have some similarities. You know, I love to read. Your dad loves to watch the news, and he loves history. You know, so in our ways, in some ways we are very compatible.
So you've had two children, and your eldest being Braden, your son, and myself. So what do you remember about when Braden and I were born in each instance?
Well, Braden was born when we were living in Houston, and that was tough because even though it was 3 hours away from home, Mom had 6 other kids at home, so it made me sad in a way because we weren't anywhere near family and they couldn't come see us. So Mom and Dad came to the baptism, but they couldn't stay very long. And but Braden was he was a sweet baby. He was very active. I mean, from the time he was born, and
were you in labor for a long time?
Oh no, no, maybe an hour, an hour or two, not that long. But he, I mean, he was just a sweet baby, and I didn't work for the year that he was born, and your dad was working for Penny's at Alameda Mall, so I made a lot of friends. I had a lot of friends that, wives of men that worked with your dad, and yeah, we became very close. One of them was Deanie Stone, and she had a little boy, and then Vicky, I can't remember her last name, but she had a little boy named Bryce, and your dad and those two kids were really good friends, and your brother. And so Braden has a magnetism, that people are drawn to him. He's smart, he's funny, he's a great sense of humor, and he always had a lot of friends.
And so Braden was born in Pasadena or in Houston?
No, Pasadena.
Okay.
We lived in Pasadena.
And he was born in 1971.
Yeah.
Correct. And then what do you remember about when I was born?
I remember that I started having contractions, I want to say like at 5 in the morning or something. And I wasn't sure that I was really in labor. So I remember like polishing my toenails in case I was going to the hospital. And then I had a red sailor dress on. It was red with like a sailor collar. And your dad's like, he was sleeping, and I woke him up. I said, I honestly think I'm going to have this baby. He said, seriously, look how you're dressed. You got your toenails painted and your makeup on and your sailor dress. So we got in the car. We get in the elevator at the hospital, and my water broke. Oh, I got my dress all wet. I mean, the people in the elevator, I was mortified. So then they take me back, and your dad is in the waiting room, and so he goes on and he asks the nurse, can I see my wife before she has a baby? She's like, she had that baby. She just popped out. And seriously, you just popped out. It's like, and I remember my gynecologist telling me, you know what? If you ever have any more babies, you don't have to go to the hospital the day before. So.
And so,
now we were living in Lake Charles at the time. Yeah, and so, yeah, I mean, you were baptized in St. Martinville, and a lot of the family got to go to the baptism, obviously.
And so, do you have any explanation for the hole that's on the top of my head? Was I ever dropped?
Hang on a second. Let me think about this.
Were the forceps too tight, pulling me out?
Alicia. That's another question.
Come out as an alien through your stomach. So were you ever scared to be a parent at any time?
No. I don't even, I wanted a baby so bad when Braden was born. You know, I didn't think I was ever going to have a baby. It's like we had been married 2 or 3 years and 70 months. Yeah, and I was thrilled. You know, we were living in an apartment in Pasadena, and you know, I think now it must have been really hard. I had no one except my friends. You know, I didn't have any family around me, and so I was glad I could spend that first year with Braden, because I felt like I was in an alien community. You know, and my friends were my most important people. And then we moved to Lake Charles when you were 6 weeks old. So Braden was 5 and you were 6 weeks old. I'm sorry, excuse me. We moved to Lake Charles, and then you were born there. And 6 weeks later, when you were 6 weeks old, we moved to Atlanta.
And so, what 3 words would you say represented your approach to parenting, and why?
Courage.
What kind of parent were you?
I think courage. Most of all, as I said, I wasn't anywhere near family. I want you to think about that a minute. You know, all my friends in Louisville had parents and grandparents and sisters and brothers. I had no one. So, I mean, I think I had to have been courageous. I knew I was independent, because I was, you know, making clothes, and I was making drapes, and I was, you know, being a mother, and with no help. So I think I never really thought that I was having a difficult time, but now that I look back on it, I wonder, you know, I don't remember having any difficulty with that, ever.
And so, what were each of us like when we were young, Braden and I?
Well, y'all both had a lot of friends, but Braden, he was all boy. You know, he used to play so hard that he would come in the house, you know, the one in Alberta Lane, and I had a big chair by the door, and he was so cute. He would fall down in it and just fall asleep, you know, and I would let him sleep for, you know, a while until I'd, you know, make him take a bath or have dinner. But he was such a cute kid. He was so active. You know, like, he had tons of friends, Travis Reed and Wayne, what was his name?
Wayne
Smith, and yeah, just a lot of friends, and he, you know, he loved to ride bikes. He loved to, you know, swim with all the other kids, and you as a child. Let me think about that a minute. Let's see. First of all, you never wanted to go to sleep at night without me. So I would put you in bed, and your eyes were like this, and I'd rock the cradle, and then you'd close your eyes, and then I'd lie down on the floor, and I'd rock the cradle with my foot, and then I'd try to sneak down, and I'd rock the cradle with this foot, and I'd like slink out of the room, and the minute I hit the door, you would stand up. Like, where are you going, Mom? So I remember talking to my pediatrician about that. I said, I'm not getting any sleep at night. I don't know what to do. He said, lock her in a room. I said, locking her in a room? He said, yes, you have to do that. Alicia, I tried it one night, and I could not. You were crying so much. And I went in there, and you had vomited in the bed. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. So, you know, then he said, lock your door. And then you would come bang on the door. So, I mean, I don't know how old you were till you stopped sleeping with us. And then one night, your door was unlocked. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, get a call from Diane down the street, Amanda's mother. Alicia's over here, knocking on my door. I'm like, no, she's not. She's in her room. I go in there. You had unlocked the front door, gotten on your big wheel, driven it down the street, 2 houses down, gone up the stairs, and knocked on the door, 3 in the morning. I thought. And then another time, I'm just thinking of the funny things you did.
Would you say that's where my abandonment issues have come from?
Exactly. And so, wait. So you're on top of the house with Sarah across the street, the little blonde Sarah, and you ordered a pizza. How did you order a pizza? Did you call him on the phone? You didn't have any money? And And then Joe next door and Lorraine, Joe would call me and say, Alicia's naked in the driveway again. Seriously? I was like, you sure that's my baby? They must have switched him in the hospital. You or something.
So how would you say how have we changed or not changed?
And we being,
Braden and I.
how have Braden and I changed? Well, I mean, you're mature adults. Use mature loosely. You know. Well, honestly, I think y'all have the same personality as you did. Obviously, you know, you both have tons of friends that like you, and you're very successful. And
So what were Braden and I's relationships with each other
when?
and with you like when we were young and now?
Say that again. What
were your children's
Relationships
relationships with each other and with you like when we were young and now?
Your relationship with me, right?
What were our relationships like with each other?
Oh, with each other and with me. Okay, well, you know, you and Braden were how many years apart? 5? 5 years apart. So you kind of drifted toward your own friends, you know. And I mean, I think when you were little, you played a lot together, but you had separate friends because you were 5 years apart. And a relationship with me, I mean, I thought we had an amazing relationship. We were very close, and I never really saw a problem with that when y'all were growing up. You know, you got a chance to live in, you know, different communities. So you don't remember Lake Charles, but, you know, Braden had a lot of friends there, and I think that, you know, we always did a lot of things as a family when y'all were little.
What kind of activities
Well,
did we do as a
you know, I
family?
remember on the weekends, I mean, when y'all were in school, we did a lot, you know, like swim team in the summer. That's one thing I loved about being a teacher is I got to spend every summer with y'all. I mean, that was 3 months back in the day, and you know, I got off at 3:30 in the afternoons, and I had, you know, weekends off. So that was, and your dad worked a lot on the weekends when he was in retail. So I got to spend a ton of time with y'all. And I remember, you know, taking you to the pool in the summer and all the things we did. 4th of July parade, went up with that big bonnet on you, and Braden decorated his bike with all the 4th of July stuff, and y'all both won these contests. I was so proud of you. And that you played tennis, and you played softball and baseball, and we had, and then I remember when y'all were really little, after church on Sunday, we would go to this place, I think it was called Treasure Island Restaurant. Do you remember that? It was in Marietta.
We would go to Transfiguration Restaurant.
That's a church.
I mean, church. When Moses parted the Red Sea, we would go to Transfiguration Church, and I remember we would go to Po Folks. And I remember we would go to some restaurant that we would paddle boat.
Yeah, that was it. That was Treasure Island. They had a little pond and a paddle boat. You do remember that?
I did.
Well, yeah, we did a lot of stuff with y'all on Sunday. That was probably the only day your dad was off. But we had a lot of fun when y'all were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even though, as I said before, we had no family here at all. So, you know, our friends, you know how many friends we have in the neighborhood. And it's like when your children are younger, you have so many friends. And when they grow up, it's different. You hardly even know your neighbors.
So what would you say, what was most satisfying to you about raising children, and what was the most difficult?
Well, I think the most satisfying is seeing your children grow up and trying to realize in the moment. And you know what's sad is, as a parent, you don't realize in the moment. You don't. You say that when you get older, but you're so busy with children. You know, you don't. It's like you don't look at them and say, "Oh my gosh, look how much they've grown," because you don't have that kind of perspective. Like I have a lot more perspective with Jake and Talia now because I'm a grandmother and I don't have so much going on, you know. And that's one of the reasons I do pictures so much, because I can see from one year to the other how much they've changed in personality, and
And Jake and Talia are Braden's children.
yeah, Braden's children. So I'm still waiting on Alicia, but yeah, I think that when you know, when your kids are growing up, you don't have that perspective. But as I said, I mean, we had, even though I worked a lot, and I used to feel guilty about that. I mean, after the fact, but you were loved and you had friends, and you know, you had a great, I think, a great childhood. No, I mean, I never had any problems with y'all ever.
So what values did you try to raise your children with, and how did you go about doing that?
Well, values. I think that, you know, I wanted you to understand the importance of family, which I think you both do, and I wanted you to understand that, you know, if you don't have a lot of family around you, then the family you do have is very important. You need to nurture that, and I think that, you know, the family values. I think you have both have learned that's very important.
So what forms of discipline did you use and why?
We all were perfect children. I never had to discipline you. Honestly, I don't ever remember grounding you guys for anything. I don't, maybe I'm just remembering. Do you remember any of that?
So would you say Dad was more of the disciplinarian?
I don't well, yes. Yes, I do. Well, like I said, I do remember some occasions, but y'all never did anything really bad that we had to discipline y'all for.
So what message do you have for Braden that you want him to always keep in mind?
Well, I wanted to keep in mind, I think Braden knows that, you know, how important family is, and that you have to nurture that. You know, he's a good dad, and I think he loves his children, and he realizes how important their relationship is.
So what message do you have for me that you want me to always keep in mind, your daughter?
That your mother is your favorite person in the whole world, and that she will never live with you as long as you have dogs in the house. And the other message is that you value your family as much as your pets.
So tell us how you chose your career and what was your favorite part about it?
What?
How you chose your career. What was your favorite part about it?
Well, as I said, you know, I wanted to be a teacher, and I achieved that. And gosh, I was thinking the other day, I've taught in 10 schools in 3 states. I've had 15, 16 principals. You know, I was department head in 3 of the largest high schools in the state of Georgia. English department head. And so I got a chance to be an administrator and a teacher. And, you know, several of my professors and, you know, colleagues, like principals and assistant principals, said, you need to be an administrator. And I never wanted to leave the classroom, because once you leave the classroom, you don't educate, you manage people. And I thought, what kind of feeling of accomplishment do you get from that when you manage people? Where when you're educating a child, you have to educate yourself. I mean, I remember, you know, every time I taught a new class, Brit Lit, American Lit, I had to study my tail off. Then I taught world religions, comparative religions. I mean, I had to study and study and study. And I taught, when I became department head, I thought, I'm going to teach every single grade level. I'm going to teach the special kids and the average kids and the honors kids. Because if I'm going to be department head, I have to know every single level on 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, and 12th. Because I wanted to have an understanding of what teachers were going through. So I never, when I did the schedule, gave a teacher all, you know, low-level classes. And a lot of department heads do that. I made sure they had an honors class, low-level or medium, you know. And then a lot of times I just let them figure out the schedule so they'd be fair to each other. But I think that I enjoyed teaching more than I enjoyed the administrative part.
And so seeing as you took the initiative to teach all different grade levels and types, for your special kids, do you have a certain story or memory from teaching your special kids that sticks out? Perhaps in connection with Susan Ellis?
Oh my gosh. Don't make me talk about that. I can't do that.
Okay.
I can't. No, I can't do that.
All right, so
I will say this, that, I keep saying I'm going to write a book about teaching, but I just, I have so many projects I want to do. But I did about 10 years before I retired, keep all the notes and things that kids wrote to me in a big notebook, and it was this thick. And I wanted to tell teachers, start doing that your first year of teaching, because when I had a bad day or a bad parent conference, I'd open that thing and read these notes that kids sent to me. And a lot of them were from these special kids. And they came to me for everything. Sometimes, I can even tell you what issues they came to me with that legally I had to tell a counselor. So I would make them come in, or I would be fired or sent to prison. If you feel a child is being abused or in any way is going to commit suicide and they confide in you, have to go. And so I would tell them, you have got to come with me to the counselor's office. You can come with me or not, but I have to go. I have to go. And so they would come with me, and then we'd have to call a parent, so the parent would get furious. But I had so many kids. I had kids who were gay who came to me. And I remember this one kid that I'm still in touch with. He's in his 40s. And he told me when he was a senior he was gay. And I said, that's fine. And he said, but Miss Barra, I want to tell my dad. I said, well, how's he going to react? He said, he'll kick me out. I said, don't tell him. Do not tell him until you graduate. Or, because then he said he won't pay for college. I said, look, don't tell him. I'm giving you this advice. You can do it or not. So, and when he came out to his dad, after he graduated from college, he was fine.
So what would you say made you successful at your work in your career?
I think my work ethic, because it was grueling sometimes. I remember when, you do the math. I had 33 kids in a class and I had 5 classes. How many kids is that? 160? And I had essays to grade, and I had vocab test to grade, and I had lit test to grade, and I had research papers to grade. It was overwhelming, and I don't know how I did it and raised y'all at the same time. Do you remember I was grading papers at your baseball games, softball games, and I bring papers with me everywhere. And it was grueling, but and it was difficult, but I liked it. I never said I hated my job. Maybe till the last couple of years. I taught 35 years, and I taught half day the next 5, to build up my salary for my retirement. But education was changing, and I got out at the right time.
So what times in your life truly tested your mettle, and what did you learn
My
about
mettle? Tested my...
What really tested you? What times in your
you?
life really tested you, and what did you learn about yourself by dealing or not dealing with them? This is in regard to your whole life, not just career.
Times in my life tested me. Well,
what were some of the most difficult times?
Well, I think the most
life?
difficult was moving away from family. Obviously, and the hardest move was when you were 6 years old and Braden was 5. 6 weeks old and Braden was 5 when we moved over here. And literally, I think I had postpartum depression. And I remember having these sponge rollers in my hair, and I was in my robe all day long. And your dad got David to come over here because I was in a big city. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where to drive. We're in an apartment. I didn't know anybody my whole life who lives in an apartment. Well, we're in an apartment in Pasadena, but that was close to Louisiana. But I was literally lost it. And one day, I was walking out, I was taking you out of the pool, and this girl comes out of her apartment. She's got 2 little boys, and her name was Melissa Green. And she was from Alabama, and we just hit it off. She talked like that. And we just hit it off right away. And she said, I want to, come to see me tomorrow and bring, Brady and Alicia. So I went in her apartment and she was ironing her husband's underwear, tidy whities. And I thought, and then she showed me how to fry chicken. And then guess what her two little boys' names were? Hunter Green and Forest Green. And I knew she was going to be my good friend for a long time. So we took our kids to the pool every day. And her husband started a brick business in Atlanta. There were no bricks. That's why everything was cedar, glass, and stone. Remember? It's 76, our first home here. And his house was brick. His driveway was brick. His mailbox was brick. He had a pool that was brick. And then he became very successful. And I would drive past their house every day when I taught at Walton. And then we kind of lost touch. But that I think was the most grueling experience, to move over here and to, not have family. And as I said, once we moved in a house in Holly Springs, yeah, our friends became our family. We had such close friends. And they were all from all over the country. So, very few of them had family here. So that was, it was a time when people were flocking to Atlanta, because this is where the jobs were. It's where all the industry was.
So how would you say the world has changed since you were young?
Oh my gosh. I could talk all night about that. Well, I think media has changed the world in both good and bad ways. I think that we're more connected with media, but the irony is we're not connected. So, let's think about social media. You can connect with people all over the world, friends you don't see anymore you can connect with. But as I was telling you, we were driving by a restaurant today and every single person was, tapping on that cell phone, checking whatever, Facebook or whatever. So I think that relationships are lost in that way because you're really not connecting. I mean, I remember writing letters when I was growing up, and think about that. You've got something tangible in your hands. Or, we didn't watch TV, we played outside. I think, media in terms of that, we listen to the radio. And media has changed the structure of community and the structure of families. I mean, how difficult is it to get a kid away from the TV, or get him away from the iPad, or get him away from the phone? We're addicted to our devices now, and I think that is the most difficult change that has happened since I grew up. We didn't have any of that to deal with. I mean, we sat on front porches and watched people walk by and visited neighbors, and I think that might happen in small towns, but it's doubtful. I mean, everybody's dealing with that issue.
So what 3 events would you say most shaped your life?
What 3 events? The birth of my children, my marriage to your dad, and I think my relationship with my parents and grandparents, that they had a profound effect on me, and my whole family, my whole, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles. I think they had a tremendous effect on me.
And so when you think about your spouse, how would you describe him?
I tell you, I think sometimes that I don't deserve your dad. I mean, everybody has ups and downs in a marriage, but he is, he's so patient with me. I don't know how he does it. Every day he brings me coffee in the morning and he'll say, "Have I told you that I loved you?" Or he sing, "Have I told you that I loved you? You are my sunshine." And I'm thinking, I am grumpy in the mornings. I don't know what to say about it. I don't wake up happy. That's my nature. I get happier during the day. He's happy, and he talks in the morning. Talks. You wake up and you don't want to hear any talking, but he's like, "Can I sit by you?" So, yeah, he's the best part of me, I think. I would think that he would think the same thing, but as I said, he's very patient with me.
So what message do you have for Dad that you want him to always keep in mind?
Well, that I love him more than I've loved any other person in the world except for you guys, you and Braden. But that he's a wonderful husband, and we've had so many good years together. And I mean, how many people can say they're happily married for 47 years, despite the ups and downs that any couple has. But we've managed to weather those times together. And I think now that we're older, we really appreciate it, and we're having fun. Now that we're both retired, and we have, we're traveling, which we love to do. And, his next wish is that we could travel more in the States. I want to go back to Europe one more time, but I don't know. We'll see.
So what 3 words would you say best describe who you've tried to be in life and how you want to be remembered?
Oh, wow. 3 words? Oh. I want to be remembered? Wow. Well, I would hope that people would say that I'm basically a good person. I would hope people would think that about me. That I was remembered as a good mother and grandmother, and that I really had my priorities straight in terms of what's important in life. My husband, my family, my children, my grandchildren.
And thirdly?
And Sloan. And thirdly?
And the third word that would best
Oh,
describe
the
who
third
you tried
word
to
that
be
would
in
best
life?
describe. I thought I said 3. Well, maybe exciting and vibrant, because I feel that's what I am.
Colorful?
Colorful.
In more ways than one. And so, when we think about our careers, what do you want your children to focus on?
You and Braden?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in terms of careers,
Mm-hmm.
well, I think being successful is liking what you do. And sometimes that's difficult, I know. I think that when people say that, they want it to happen. But, I had some difficult times in my career, but I managed to weather the storm. But it's, I would hope that you guys would have a career that you feel comfortable in, and you feel successful in, and you both are successful in your own right. Because I think that's important. No matter how stressful the job is, that you would do what's really important to you, and that you can manage to get that job if you needed to.
And so what have you learned about other people in life? Trustworthy, kind or not, or mean?
Other people.
What have you learned about other people in life?
Wow. Well, I know that the relationships that your dad and I have with people from Louisiana that were friends that we grew up with, I think that's amazingly important, because the connections we made there are strong. I would say that that's what I've learned, that they're true friends. And we talk about that all the time. We've had friends in Atlanta, but not really long-lasting friendships. I don't know why, because we're so far apart, in terms of distance. And I guess, everybody has grandchildren now. They're busy, and I see, people focusing more on children and grandchildren now because we're older.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think the world needs more of right now?
The entire world? Compassion. I think that when I see people, even on Facebook, and your dad likes to watch the news 5 times a day, and it's repeated 5 times a day, and it's like the sensationalism that so much bad going on in the world right now, and it makes you wonder. There's so much hate in terms of everything. I mean, ISIS and the shootings. I was reading something on Facebook the other day that there have been more shootings in this country than the days in the year. Did you see that? That, I mean, it's a message of hate, and we all talk about it and wish things would change, but I don't know. I just would hope that people can learn to be more compassionate about each other.
What's provided you the greatest satisfaction in life?
Oh, definitely my family. Definitely.
What were the 3 best decisions you ever made?
Having y'all, marrying your dad, and probably my choice of career.
What are you most proud of in life?
I think you and Braden and your dad. I think that your dad's been very successful. He had the courage to do so many things that I don't think I ever could have done. I always got a good teaching job, and I think your dad, he was in retail. It was in an extremely difficult career, and I didn't even realize that we were so caught up in living that he worked so hard. He worked weekends for years, and I'll never forget that summer we took you guys to the beach, and the second day we were there, his boss told him to go back, come back to Atlanta, and I told him, I said, I don't care what we have to do, but you can't do this anymore. You cannot do this. And so, and he had the courage to go into a totally different field, work for Prudential, and then open his Allstate office. And he kept saying, I wish I'd done this 20 years ago. Well, that didn't happen. But look how successful he was in that little time. He got Rookie of the Year his first year. We won trips to all these places that we never would have gone to, never would have afforded to go to, stayed in 5-star hotels. I mean, I'm very proud of what he's done to take care of us.
And so, if these were your last words to your family,
Oh, wow. Are we getting morbid now?
what would you like to share with us?
My last words? How much I love you and how proud I am of all of you, and that I don't think I ever could have had a more satisfying life than I had. I had loving parents, wonderful siblings, and I treasure all those things because I think about all the time when I look around and see families that are not connected with each other, and I'm living a wonderful life, and my children are healthy and happy, and and your dad and I are thankfully healthy too. So I think that would be what I would say. That I have had an amazing life.
What are you most thankful for?
What am I most thankful for? I thought I answered that question. You and Braden and your dad and my grandchildren, Sloan, and our family relationship, that we're still all close to each other.
And so, wrapping this up, do you have anything you want to add or any final words?
Well, I'm so glad you did this. I wish so much that I had done that with my grandparents and parents. I know I have a little cassette tape of, when I recorded Dad, but, I can't even, I still have my mom's phone number, her Louisville phone number in my phone. I can't get rid of it. And I wish I don't have any recordings of her voice. And everybody should do that, because I just think of how close I was to my grandmother, Mom Wick. She was like a mother to me. And, I miss her every day. I've missed her every day since she's died, but everything's in a memory. It's a memory, but I think as you get older and you realize that all you have is a memory, I don't care how good it is, it's not tangible. You know, this will be something tangible that you and Braden and Talia and Jake and will have. That you'll have my voice. You'll remember the way I look. It'll help bring back memories. I mean, I have a lot of photo albums, but to me, this is the way to remember. And I remember seeing something on television. It was a movie about this woman who knew she was dying, and she not only made this recording, videotaped herself talking to her children, but she had written cards for every occasion that she was going to miss. Birthdays, graduations, weddings. And I thought, you know, that was such a treasure. That would be such a treasure to a child to have that kind of memory of your mother, you know, especially if it's a tragic death and, you know, you have lost that important relationship. So I think that that is compelling what you're doing, and God help you if I die before your dad does, because you know you have to take care of him.
Well, thank you for being open and honest with your answers, and it's definitely been a learning experience on my part, and I can tell you from my perspective, I feel lucky to have had you as a mother, and
I'm
I
not
want
going
you
anywhere.
to know that, and
I'm not going anywhere.
I love you.
Love you too. I love you.